Albatross here again with the Cypher Unlimited crew. We have our usual suspects of AD or Alpha Dean. We have Spigs18 or Anthony. And Dean, what are we doing here tonight?
Well, like we like to do, we like to have these sessions where we talk to people and all that good stuff. And we're talking to none other than Charles Ryan tonight, a man who really doesn't need an introduction, but we're going to give him one anyway. He's COO of Monte Cooke Games, our favorite place, our favorite people. And Charles has a very extensive background, more than 25-year career in the gaming industry. You talk about from trading cards, miniature games, role-playing games. You talk about it, he's probably touched it. He served as a global brand manager for Dungeons and Dragons and headed up marketing departments in the UK. So, man, without further ado, Charles, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on. And I'm going to toss it over to Anthony.
More importantly, Charles, welcome back. But we're here to talk about Stealing Stories for the Devil, the MCG's latest new Kickstarter. It's awesome. We got to play it. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But this is a phenomenal product, and I'm super excited to get to talk to Charles about this because we have a lot of questions, Charles.
Excellent.
Not only us, but we want our community wants answered. So, I don't think you really need an introduction. This is like your third or fourth time you've been on the show. If you don't know who Charles is, shame on you. You should, because if you're a fan of MCG, you should know who Charles is. He basically makes MCG run behind the scenes, which is the most important. He's the CEO of MCG. So Charles, let's jump right into it. We can just cut the chase. You started a brand new Kickstarter called Devils Made Us Do It yesterday, and it's already fully funded. You've hit 2 stretch goals already in climbing. I can't say more. I'm really surprised at how well it's doing. But it's a standalone RPG. It's a complete RPG game in a box set. Stealing Stories for the Devil is the actual title of the game. Could you tell our audience about this game and, a little bit about the setting so they'll know, what's the game about?
Most of the times, if you ask me about a new game that we're working on, setting is probably where I'd start with, because I think that's what hooks a lot of people to a lot of games, myself included. However, the real star of the show on Stealing Stories isn't the setting per se, although it is pretty cool. It's the characters themselves, because the characters and the players have a degree of control over the story and the setting that isn't typical for most role-playing games, and that's probably what sets it apart. I can circle back around to that, but specifically about the setting, it's set in the modern world, and you and I would look around and we'd see it, it would look exactly like the regular world. But to the characters, they actually have arrived on Earth or in orbit of Earth recently because they were on a ship that was exploring other dimensions 1,000 years in the future. Well, further than that, more than that. It was an interdimensional exploration ship. It has come back to Earth after seeing a whole lot of different realities and seeing maybe some things that weren't quite right. When they got back to Earth, things were definitely not quite right because they were, 1,000+ years back in their ancient history. This was a generation ship, so that everybody that's on it is either people that have lived on it for generations or people that were cryogenically frozen and have been awakened for this purpose. So they're all people that either their background is in the far future or their background has been living on the ship for their entire life. But in either regard, their background is not from this Earth. But what they observe on this Earth is that there's pockets of reality not working properly. They call it improbability zones, areas where something is wrong. It's a geographical area, very specific, and within that, there's something that's causing that, and it's usually an object that seems very innocuous. And the thing about messing with time and interdimensional stuff is you can't just go in with a sledgehammer. You can't use, all the technology that comes off of the ships. You've got to act subtly because you're trying to fix reality, not break reality further. So you have to work with subtlety. So the way they fix this is they take some people from the ship and they send them down to go in and get that item in sort of a heist-like scenario where they need to do it using subtlety and guile and disturbing reality as little as possible in terms of like you don't want to create big explosions, you don't want to kill lots of people, you don't want to do really radical stuff. If you can get that improbability key out there, get the key out, the improbability zone collapses back to normal, and for all the people there, it was as though it had never happened, as though everything had been normal. So this could have actually happened. It could have happened here in Kansas City, and I could have been turned into a monkey, and I didn't even, but then they got the key out. Kansas City returned to normal, or Overland Park returned to normal, and I wasn't a monkey, and I don't remember being a monkey because I never was a monkey. I was actually the normal person. But to do that, these characters, the characters that we play, they're called liars because they're not just from the future. They also have their own ability, either through the advanced technology that they have from the ship or through their own innate ability to alter reality themselves in small and subtle ways, but in important ways. And this allows them to sort of change the stakes or change what's going on in a given scenario. So if you're running down the hallway because you've been discovered by the guards and you weren't supposed to be, but they discovered you and they're chasing you and you need to get away from them, you could lie that around that corner there's a door and you could go through that door. So you can change reality to put yourself back into control of the situation. There's limits to that, and we can talk about that later too. But that's sort of the type of character you are. You're a character who can come in, change reality, but you're trying to do it. You need to do it in small and subtle ways as you carry out this heist to retrieve this improbability key and get out of the zone and allow reality to heal itself. So that's sort of the fundamentals of what's going on in the setting as you were. Now, it's basically the real world as we know it, but with these weird elements.
That sounds super cool.
Okay.
No, I was going to say it sounds super cool.
I mean, I could definitely see your point now because the setting it's important. It's in the backdrop. But according to where your characters are actually playing the game, the genre could be multiple things, right? Because, you have the setting in the background, but the in the moment game could be several different genres.
Right.
Yeah.
And the whole thing about being able to lie to reality, that's not just like a magic power that you might give to a character in another genre. Like in the Cypher system, you might have some ability to let you do something really cool. This is more about what you, as the player, do when you use that ability. When you lie, you become the GM. You put the GM's hat on for a moment, right? So you have the same power that the GM has to kind of do things by fiat. You have the same responsibility that the GM has to keep that in the story, right? So the GM has in almost every role-playing game, right? The GM has almost infinite fiat ability to just say, well, this is what happens, right? But they're not going to do something really dumb. They're not going to just say spontaneously to the first level D&D characters, an ancient red dragon shows up and just kills you, right? Like, because that's just what doesn't make the game any fun. Do the rules allow the GM to do that? They do. That's not what the GM is going to do. Same thing with the GM in Cypher System, and same thing with the GM in Stealing Stories. But Stealing Stories gives a little bit of that power to the players when you're the liar. When you're telling a lie, you're changing what that person sees or remembers. You're causing the guard to be sleepy so they fall asleep. You're messing with the wiring of that camera. You're making the car go a little bit faster. All these things you might do, you're going to have to keep that within, like you put on the GM's hat and you have complete fiat as a player, but you're going to keep it within the scope of what the game's about because that's what's fun. That's not to say that we're relying only on your good graces to behave properly. There are also mechanical considerations that will affect you if you get too extreme. But the cool thing about the game is the way it shares that ability to shape the narrative, and then that kind of goes to why the characters are sort of more important in the setting because the players will also both in that process and also when you create the scenario have a great deal of influence on what's going on in that scenario, which is a whole other thing to talk about.
It definitely sounds really cool, like a lot of fun. I did have like a quick follow-up thing, just to like if we could expand upon the player putting on that GM hat for a moment. Is this sort of like Cypher System with the player intrusions and they like negotiate with the GM, or do they just completely get full reins and there's no discussion? Like, well, how is it handled?
So I mean, I can't imagine any game. Right. So I can't imagine any game where like trying to do something that wouldn't be some element of negotiation, right?
Yeah.
Because you all want to work together for the best possible thing, but the mechanics of the situation are that when you say I'm going to change reality in some way, I'm going to that light bulb burns out at just the right moment and the hall is plunged into darkness, right? That decision is it's going to, depending on the sort of the veracity of it, how likely is it that light bulbs burned out, and the scope of it. Like, is it one light bulb that burns out, or for whatever reason, all the light bulbs in the room burn out at the same time, right? Those two things will affect how hard, I want to use the right words here, what the consequences are for a lie. Because this is the cool thing too. Just like with GM Fiat, when the player tells that lie, the player says what happens, and it happens, right? There's no roll to see if you're successful. The player literally has that narrative control for that moment. But depending on that scope and that veracity of the lie, there's a consequence. And so the player is in fact going to roll a die, but the die is going to be to see how much or whether there's any consequence that the player has to do. And the consequences go up to and including becoming injured or very injured as a result of telling a lie. This is representing sort of the fatigue and the massive energy drain that can come out of, you know, altering reality through sheer willpower.
Yeah, when we played with Sean, the consequences was more fun. You know, it was what made the scenario fun.
Yeah, it was.
I
Like
mean, some of the
said,
lies were cool. The consequences is what, you know, it added spice to the chicken.
it was cool because, you know, and like you said, you kind of even have control of that idea. You know, it's like, all right, you know, this has to be huge. Okay, I'm taking a big chance. You know, and then you're like, nice, please, nice, you know. So,
Right.
It was great. I mean, I think it's phenomenally done. So I guess, you know, I would ask that question. So I'm gonna move on. You know.
Al, did you ask your question?
No. So the next question actually is what you call it. So you already touched upon it, the whole lying aspect. Can you talk a little bit about how what drove you guys to like use lying as this sort of mechanic, and how did you guys manage to incorporate lying within a heist RPG?
So, you know, I think the first part of your question will be a great one for Monte when you talk to him. I think you got him on in a couple weeks, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, like, because this is Monte's baby, right? And he rolled out his initial ideas for this to us. Gosh, it was at a summit, so it was well before the pandemic, and I think it was before Gen Con of 2019. So we'd be talking
3 years,
solidly 2 years ago. The first time we played a version of what would become Stealing Stories for the Devil. So clearly there's an evolution there where Monte was thinking about how you know, this type of game, and a game where the players gain some narrative control. And I don't want to put any words in his mouth, but I would say that I think he saw a parallel. Like, he wanted to bring that sort of lying element in there, specifically as a way for players to kind of own the narrative for a moment here and there, right? Like, so that's sort of the element. Now, how he went from that initial concept, which wasn't strictly a heist game, to Stealing Stories, which became very heist, that you'd have to ask him.
I like that little teaser of like what we
So
can
when-
expect to hear from Monte.
So when you originally like played it, was it a heist game, or it was just basically playing around with the mechanics of lying? When you
No, it was actually more. So let's talk a little bit about how the heists are built, right? Because that's another, I think, really unique element of this game, and really cool and very central to what it is. You know, we've all played a game where, like, we had a group of bumbling murder hobos, and we decided to make a plan, and then, you know, then it became Leroy Jenkins, and everything fell apart the minute anything happened. Like, we've all played that game. It is hard to run a game where it's based around having a complex plan and having it come together. You know, and I think that's, I kind of joke about the bumbling murder hobos. That's not really the player's fault per se. It's also partly because that when the GM sets up something, like, what's the GM going to do, like, for an Ocean's 11 game? Are they literally going to, like, map out all of Las Vegas and then hope that the players are smart enough to actually figure out a way to break into a vault, right? Like, that's really a big ask if it's hard. And an author or a filmmaker, you're going to make Ocean's 11, you have the advantage that you're both creating the scenario and creating the plan and controlling the characters at the same time, right? And so that's the element that's, I think, is really unique. The heisty element that's really unique about Stealing Stories is that it replicates that. It, instead of saying the GM is going to write a scenario and then the players are going to come and play it, you work at it together. So the GM says, you know, okay, the improbability key is a thumb drive and it's being kept, and it, you know, it's on a traveler who's passing through this airport, right? And so then the players say, yes, it's an airport that's it's a really huge and multinational airport, or they say it's a regional airport or whatever. And so one of the players who's good at electronics and says, okay, well, I'll plan on breaching their electronic system so that we can control the cameras at the right time or whatever. They're going to suggest that, and the player's going to say yes, and that's going to be hard because, and the GM throws in some complication, and you keep going back and forth. And what's happening is you're building the scenario at the same time that you're building the plan, and you're also, because the players, of course, are going to want the plan to take advantage of their skills. The person that's great at climbing and sneaking is going to want a plan where they have to scale the building and go through an air duct because that's what they're good at, right? So you're building a plan like a heist where all the characters fit together, just like Ocean's 11, right? Where everybody has their own little role to play that they're expert at, and then the scene comes up where they get to do their expert thing. Like that's how this all comes together. You've built that plan together. You've built the scenario at the same time. The GM is throwing in complications, and that allows it to all then play out in a way where everybody's sort of playing the same game, and it's not the players trying to figure out what the magic clues are that the GM might have put in there. Nice. So that's Stealing Stories. Going back to your question, the game that we played when we very first played this wasn't a heist game per se, but it did have that element in which the GM, Monte, was running it because obviously he was the one who was showing it to us all, and he was like, okay, I'm going to start us off with this, and he gave a little scenario, and then he said, so why are you here? What's your part in this? What's happening? And the players would then contribute these elements to it to help build the scenario, and then we'd play through it.
That's sweet. So, we're talking about all of this good stuff, and, on the Kickstarter page, of course, it gives a brief and tertiary overview of the character types.
Mm-hmm.
Well, can you talk a little more in depth about those types, and do you have a personal favorite, of those types so far?
So character types, to be super clear, we're not talking about types in the same way we would be if we're talking in Cypher System, right? We're not talking about a type. So there are three general ways that you lie to reality, and so you get those three character types from that. And there's also two sort of backgrounds from the ship, and so you basically sort of have six combinations there, if you will. From the ship, you have people that were either sleepers, or you have people that are scions. The scions were born and raised and lived their entire life on the ship. That's their environment. That's the world as they know it. The sleepers were cryogenically frozen as the ship traveled, and so even though they may have been awake since the ship originally left Earth a long, long time ago, they actually remember the future that they came from. And the difference between those is that the sleepers use technology. The scions have innate abilities that they have developed over the generations aboard the ship, and they don't rely on technology to do the stuff that they do. Now, that said, they all do the same sorts of things, just in different ways. And the things that they do are, you have plotters, planners, and schemers. And that's the three different ways you affect reality. You can affect the past. So you're in a chase scene, and you determine that you affect the past and say that traffic light stopped working yesterday, and so there's a utility crew working on it, and suddenly that road's going to be blocked there, right? So that's affecting the past. You can affect objects, where you can say, the wiring in the closed circuit camera system is on the fritz and it's about to go down. Oh, and it just did right at the right time, right? So that's affecting objects, and you can affect people. You can say that guard is so busy playing, Pokemon Go on their phone as they sit there in the guard booth that they are not paying any attention at all to the traffic that's going past. Those are the three different ways that you can affect reality. I'm very, object-oriented. I definitely play. I would affect things. To me, that's something I can really wrap my head around very easily. It's where I'm the most creative, I think. I'm trying to think about what to cause other people to think, or how to change something yesterday that will affect today is a little bit harder for me, I guess. It's all fun.
I really like the breakdown there because again, out of us three, I didn't participate in a play test, so I'm hearing all this stuff fresh, and it all sounds really cool, and I definitely think I would be of the one who would like affect the past. I enjoy messing with timey-wimey stuff.
Oh, you didn't play?
Oh, you played with us.
I did
Yes,
not.
yes,
I don't remember.
Yes, you did.
If I did, I don't remember then.
Yes, you did.
You played Al.
If you say
It
so.
was the three of us.
Yeah.
If you say so.
Oh my God.
It was quite a while ago. Well, either way, you know what? We'll get you another game.
I personally played the Schemer, and it was a ton of fun. I got to interact with the actual people, like the individual people in the story. Got to change what their actions and motives were, and that was so much fun.
And I was the planner. I think that's the planner who messes with stuff because I was the DJ.
Yeah, you were the DJ. Yeah, our scenario, we were on a booze cruise for college.
For a college.
I'm like listening to see if like I remember this booze cruise on a. Bruh.
I'm 100% positive you played.
Oh yeah, I know you were there, Al.
My memory is god awful. So then, like I said this in the chat, so it's as if I haven't played it. So if I don't remember, right, it must be like.
So somebody, clearly a schemer's at work here. They pulled that memory out of your mind.
Yes, that's exactly what happened. Oh boy.
It was great.
So, are we moving on from this? Because I think, first off, I think all the character types are really unique and fun. So I'm curious to see what changes happen, because we did this about a year and a half ago. So I know that the characters have been changed, in the year and a half since. So I'm really curious to see.
Yeah.
I played Schema, but all three of them sound super interesting. So I want to try all three of them. But let's talk about. Okay, I'm sorry.
I was gonna throw out there that it's important to know that unlike a character in many games, including Cypher System, right, where you have a laundry list of things that you can do that are special powers, liars, the characters in this game, the liars, they're much simpler. And really, when you say that you're a schemer, right, that's a very, like, I would actually be surprised if it changed much since when you played it, because it's very broad. It basically says you get to lie, that moment where you have that GM fiat, and you do it by affecting people's minds, right? And there's a list, and it's relatively small, of restrictions on that, like, how much you can change or how close you have to be or whether you have to touch them or stuff like that. But other than that, there's not restrictions on how you use the power. Other than, like I said, you're going to pay a price if you choose things that are too difficult.
So yeah, go ahead.
The characters are very, very simple in that regard.
Let's steer the conversation to the actual box set itself, because it looks phenomenal, by the way. If someone hasn't been to the Kickstarter, they definitely should. I posted on our Discord and our Facebook group exactly everything that you get in the box now. So let's talk a little bit about that. It's a complete game in one box. That's all you need. You buy this one product. You're going to have hours of enjoyment just from this one box. Could you explain to us what exactly right now you get for the box without the Kickstarter, without the, stretch goals? And what's the difference between the deluxe set and the regular model?
Okay. So at the core of the game are 3 books. They're called Liars, which is the book that you're going to use to make your characters, and it's going to tell you the rules and stuff like that. And if you go online and to the Kickstarter, there's a primer that you can download, 43-page primer that tells you how these characters are made and how you play the basic game, how lying works, and all these other things. And it's a 43-page version of what you would get in the Liars book, which in total scope is about 144 pages as it's currently spec'd. Then you have another book called The Devil, and this is about this is a book for the GM, and it tells you a little bit about what's going on. So we've got that background of you've come back to Earth and reality's changing, and why or what's causing it or who's there. And it also has an arc because this game is great for one-shots, but it's also great to play it as a campaign, which could be open-ended, just like Cypher System campaign or a D&D campaign or a Call of Cthulhu campaign or what have you. Or you can play the arc that we provide you. We call it a season, and it's about 12 episodes, if you will, 12 games that you'll play And as you play through it, your characters will grow, they'll advance. As a matter of fact, advancing is very important to the story. That's also a unique element. But as you advance, you will learn more and more about what's going on with reality, and the game will get possibly a little bit weird, and it'll have some really cool twists and turns, just like the heists themselves have, where you think it's going one way, and then all of a sudden something comes up, and you're like, oh my god, this changes everything, and the whole adventure, the whole campaign takes a right turn. So that's the Devil. And then you have The Stories They Steal, which is a smaller book, and this is all about helping the GM to take. So we talked about how you set up that heist and how you come together and you say it's going to be at an airport or whatever, right? So then the GM's like, oh, airport, what the heck's an airport look like, right? Well, we're going to give you an airport. We're going to give you a couple of different airports. We're going to give you some hotels, some office buildings, some hospitals, some malls, some more office buildings, some, whatever, all the different things you might use for the settings of your heists that are potential settings. We're going to give you floor plans. We're going to give you staff lists. We're going to give you ideas for names. Like there's all these different things that you could use as a GM, so that in that first act, when you spent that time coming up with that adventure, you said, okay, we're set at an airport. These are all the things that are happening, and yada, yada, yada. Then the GM could take 5-10 minutes, rifle through the book, the Stories They Steal, which is actually pretty thin, and all of the handouts that we give you, and pull out, here's a map of an airport. Let's see, do I want to use a small airport or the big airport? I'm going to use the big airport, right? Like all those sorts of things, so that you can build out your adventure very, very, very quickly. And you can have how long is it going to take the police to get there? If the guards dial 911, well, it says that in this book. Like lots and lots of reference material for the GM, resources to turn that really cool crafted adventure idea that you guys came up with into a fully fleshed out adventure that it'll seem like you spent hours prepping for, but in fact you only spent the 5 minutes while the players were over there making popcorn and getting ready for Act 2. So the 3 books, a big stack of handouts with all those maps and things that we just talked about, and we've already had a stretch goal that expands those by half a dozen. There are 10 dice, because you use polyhedral for your rolls, and then there's a second set of dice, which you get 4 of, which are used for injuries. So a total of 10 dice. Those cards, right. The mission cards and the GM's cards. The mission cards are another element that help the players be successful at heists, right? They help represent the fact that you as a player might not be James Bond or Danny Ocean or Lupin, right? You might actually not be that clever. You might not have set all this stuff up, but there's cards and things like this that create a situation where you're like, oh, that just happened? Yeah, I knew it was going to happen all along. I planned for it, and I brought this special item, or I have this piece of information, or what have you, and you turn it to your advantage. So the players get those, and then the GM has some cards that they use to introduce twists and turns into the story. And so in addition to having created the challenges during the initial setup, there are going to be moments where the GM's like, oh, you thought it was going to work that way, did you? No, it turns out there are 4 extra, it's a shift change for the guards, and there's 4 more guards there than you expected, or what have you. And the twists are small things, relatively small things that change, affecting in a given challenge in a scene. The turn is that moment in the story where it's like, oh, something completely different. We weren't expecting that, right? Like, this thing was in a museum, and we were supposed to get the diamond that is the improbability key. We didn't realize that it turns out there's this whole other big exhibit that's moving in that night, and suddenly the whole scenario is different than we expected, or we're supposed to steal this USB drive. It turns out the Russians are also after it and are sneaking in on the same night. What have you? Like that's the turn, the thing where like suddenly everything's completely different. So go ahead.
Okay. I was going to say I love the replayability of the handouts, and I think it's going to help players just by looking at the handouts. It's going to help them spark Act 1, like figuring out the scenarios, because they're going to see what's on a handout and say, hey, we'll use the airport as an example. Oh, this looks really cool. Let's put it in the airport. And
right.
It helps the players that not necessarily enjoy. I mean, a quick with the improv chops. So it's going to give them something to lean on. So that's awesome. I just want to ask a quick question. You mentioned dice. What sort of dice sets are in there? Is it is there specific dice being used?
Well,
okay.
So you're gonna roll. You're gonna roll a different die type depending on how good you are at things. And so and you can read about all this in the primer. So I would suggest to everybody who's watching, download the primer. It's really cool. So you use D4, D6, D8, D10, D12. I don't think you use a D20. I don't know. Maybe use a D20. I can't remember. That set of dice to do your die rolls when you're attempting things or when you've lied and you want to see, whether or not you're going to pay an awful price for it. Those are the dice you roll there. And the injury dice are D10s, and they're custom D10s. They only have a mark on one face. So you're going to, under certain circumstances, you have to roll an injury die when you roll your attempt to succeed at the task. And if you get that injury result, it has an effect. Initially, as the box was initially spec'd, those were going to be just, other than the injury dice, standard polyhedrals. We have already upgraded the dice in a stretch goal. So there'll be custom designed dice, but they basically have, even though they'll be pretty custom designed dice, the D10 is still just numbered 1 through 10.
So you do get a complete, actually, it looks like you get 2 complete sets of dice in the box set, correct?
No, just the one.
Just the one, okay.
Yep.
Cool. I mean, as someone who may, I don't really do much prep work, so I love having, resources available, like just to pull inspiration from, have a map ready or whatever have you. All that stuff is awesome. But speaking of...
Yeah, and you know what? It would be super useful for any game that you play that's a modern setting, to be honest, right? Like and I think there's a lot of room for stretch goals to improve that offering. That's a great place for the things to grow.
But on top of those, resources, like the, you mentioned the locations and whatnot, and the game is being sort of billed as like a zero prep or quick prep. What other sort of things are included within the set or within the rules to help kind of guide that along, having it be very little prep or zero prep?
Right. Well, so yeah, to be super clear, we're talking zero prep.
Oh.
Other than having to know the rules, right? Like you have to understand how the game plays. But if you and the players understand how the game plays, and it's a very simple game to learn, you won't do any prep to it. The GM needs what the improbability key is and what basic kind of situation it's in, right? So it's a pen, and it belongs to this executive who works in this office building. That's as much as the GM brings to the table. Literally, I am not exaggerating, right?
Whoa.
Because if you bring in any more than that, then you're presupposing the plan that's going to come up. So you said the words office building, the players are going to decide, or everybody's going to decide together, is that like a gigantic gleaming 80-story office building in downtown Chicago? Or is that like a 6-story building in a suburban office park? Or is it just a dilapidated old brownstone, right? Like it could be any of these things. Office building, you're gonna bring, that decision is going to be made during the first act of play. And all the decisions are going to be made during the first act of play.
That's awesome. That sounds so awesome.
So, just to break it down, there's 3 total acts, correct?
Correct. Yep. Yeah. So that first act is where you're doing all that creation of the scenario. So you're going to sit down and for 45 minutes or whatever, the whole group's going to go together and you're going to build out your entire plan for the heist in great detail and at the same time build out the scenario in great detail. And then you're going to take a little break. And the players are going to go get drinks or whatever, and the GM's going to spend 5 or 10 minutes rifling through the box and choosing the floor plans that they want and looking up how long it actually takes to break a vault, the code of a vault or what have you, all that, like accessing all that resource stuff. And then the players come back and you go into Act 2. And the Act 2 is where the action is happening, right? So you start off at the edge of the improbability zone. The ship could have equipped you with the clothes that you need and basic stuff like that, right? Like, so you don't, if you're going to go in as janitors, you can be already in your janitor suits or what have you. So you start carrying out your plan and you start going in. Okay, so the first thing we needed to do was make sure that we cut this wire at this place so the power goes down at the right time. So we're going to go to that place. We got to sneak in and get past the guard. And so you're following out your heist plan. And the GM might use twist cards to kind of throw something interesting into that scene or so on. And that begins to play out. The midpoint of your story is that turn card. And that's going to happen usually sometime in Act 2. Maybe been playing for an hour or whatever, and that's where the GM's like, yeah, it turns out the Russians are also there trying to get the same thing that you're trying to get, and and suddenly like everything is different, right? The players have to start thinking on their feet, and things unfold in unexpected ways, and so on and so forth. And that takes you to the end of Act 2. Let me say something really interesting about scenes, because this is another element that's different from a lot of role-playing games. We don't use our dice to figure out whether you succeed at anything. In every scene, you're going to roll the dice once, and that's going to determine the outcome of the scene. The outcome of the scene is going to be based on sort of the crux point of that scene, which is like the thing that is the most important that you're trying to do. So if it's a chase scene, right, and you're like, you can be talking about driving in and out of traffic and pulling all these tricks and back and forth, and you and the GM are talking about what you're doing to get away from that guy that's chasing you in the car, and you're going fast. But then, you know, like either because of lying or because of just the way things unfold or what have you, there's going to be that moment where you're trying to beat the train at the railway crossing, or you know, the drawbridge is going up, or there's construction there, and there's a truck in the middle of the road, and somebody's got to swerve. Like whatever that thing is that's going to happen in that chase scene, that's the crux. And that's where you're going to roll the die and see what happens. But the assumption is never like, oh, I rolled high, I succeeded, I did the thing, I drove well, or I rolled low, I guess I just wasn't driving well that day, right? The assumption was you drove well. All the characters are hyper confident, right? You do the thing. The question was it, did you drive well? It was that drawbridge at the right angle for you to jump at that moment? Or you know, you're shooting at some bad guy through a crowd. Maybe a failed roll means that you never even pulled the trigger. Like you pulled your gun, you pointed, and the guy disappeared into the crowd, right? Like it doesn't mean that you failed and missed them. It means that the scene didn't work out the way you intended.
The consequence.
I apologize, I'm getting audio from some other source.
No, don't worry, it happens.
And now I think it's gone. Okay. There are more than one set of AirPods active in my house at this time, and so every once in a while.
That's so funny.
That's funny.
You see,
So you've kind of answered this question, but I think we're gonna, you know, ask it anyway.
Okay.
Basically, are there any full adventures actually included in the box itself, or are they all made up by the players in conversation with the GM?
And so the answer is yes, because all of the adventures will be made that way. You never start off with a pre-made scenario. However, the season that's presented, the 12-episode season that's presented in the box, does give you that starting position for every single thing, and it also tells the GM about what's going on behind the scenes, like what's the importance of that key, and elements like that. And as things go on, things are going to get weirder, and like I said, there's going to be some twists, and you're going to learn why reality is doing what it does. Characters advance also through whether you play that season or open-ended campaign, and this is another cool thing. We talked about those cards that you have, right? And so the cards are the XP, and every time a card is used by the players or the GM, it goes into an XP pile, and that's the XP that the players are going to get at the end. The premise in-game is that when you sort of snap reality back to itself so that it's like back the way it should have been all along, a little bit of that power that was screwing with reality goes to you. And so your character advances, your capabilities advance, your lying abilities advance, and so on and so forth. So when you play a campaign, you will make your characters better, you'll advance them, you'll go on to bigger and more exciting stuff. But the cool thing about that, I love that that card XP mechanic, because it basically says that the wilder your story was,
The more
your characters are going to advance, right? And that's not just a conceit, right? Because the whole thing, you're stealing stories from the devil. Stories are the meta currency in this world, right? So like when you create the story that only you will know, right? Because reality got changed back. I was a monkey. I didn't know it. When you change reality back, I was never a monkey. Only you know that I was a monkey and that you got the key that saved Kansas City from the improbability zone, right? So you have this story that has made you more powerful, and only you were part of it, right? In a way, because everybody else went back to normal reality.
You know, and that's just something really unique that I really dig about how you guys keep approaching things, that you're kind of turning the aspects of typical gaming on its ear, you know, and, you know, it putting that player agency, you know, like you said, players are more in charge of their their world. So this is going to be awesome. I can't wait to get to run this. You know.
Thanks. It's a lot of fun.
So the all 12 seasons will be included in the box set, correct?
Yeah, the season arc with all 12 episodes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's
yeah,
awesome.
But again, sort of go back to what Dean was talking about, right? It's like each episode, what the GM gets. I don't want to. I'm not designing the game here, right? But like just to put it in context, it's like a page, right? It's not like an adventure where you've got 32 pages of content for you because you're going to make that content. So that arc, that 12 episode arc, is a really it's really cool, and it's full of really neat surprises and reveals and the stuff that as a GM I love. But as far as words go, it's not a lot, right? Because the story is, like I said, the stories are the meta currency, and you're going to make the stories.
Sweet.
So cool.
You guys have a great track record when it comes to making complete games. You know, No Thank You Evil was a complete game in a box. Invisible Sun, you know,
In a big
A
box.
hell of a box. But yeah.
it was a complete game in a massively heavy box.
In a heavy box. Yeah.
But can you speak a little bit about the challenges from a business perspective, creating a standalone RPG product, and what makes this different from those other two products that you guys kickstarted in the past?
Well, it's more like No Thank You Evil than it is like Invisible Sun in terms of the physical scope of the production, right? Because Invisible Sun was, it had 100 different components, and it had, resin and cards and books. I don't have to tell you all this stuff, right? It was crazy. This was much more conventional in terms of the components, right? Books, dice, cards, handouts, things on card stock. It's not. It takes, you got to know what you're doing, right? But it's not rocket science to make a boxed game. You can see many people have done it before us, right? So it is interesting though to talk about the times that we live in now, though, because there's a lot going on in the world of manufacturing that I think most people haven't even seen yet. If you keep your ear to the ground in gaming news, you've probably heard that freight costs have gone up astronomically. So there are a lot of companies that are having trouble figuring out how they're going to deliver their Kickstarter, because currently it's over in China, and it's going to cost them literally $100,000 more than they anticipated to get 3 or 4 containers of a big Kickstarter product over here. But that's the other stuff there's more subtle than that. There's a chlorine shortage right now. If you have a swimming pool, which I don't know if any of you guys do, but if you have a swimming pool, it's harder and more expensive to get chlorine for your swimming pool. Okay, whatever. But chlorine is used in the manufacture of plastics. So plastics are becoming a bit problematic to a small extent. The prices are going up. It's getting a little bit more difficult. Car prices are going through the roof right now. It's because they can't get semiconductors that the cars need, right? So there's all this disruption in the supply chain that is a result of a year and a half of the pandemic and the uncertainty of the next 6 months or a year that are affecting the supply chain. And freight is another thing too, where they mothballed a lot of ships during when the pandemic spun down so much international freight. A lot of ships were just anchored away, and they have not all necessarily come back into service. So the ports haven't spun up all the way. And so, like I said, we're heading into the time now, not right now, but not too far away. Like in September, that's when the containers full of everything that's on sale at Christmas are coming from China to the United States, right? All those containers are being booked now for things that are being produced. And, like Walmart, if you've got something at Walmart, if you sell dog food to Walmart or whatever, right, you have a contractual amount you have to give them.
Yeah.
And if you don't give them that amount, they will, charge you hundreds of thousands of dollars in fees for not providing them the dog food that they have planned out to put on their shelves in the month of September or whatever. And so the dog food company, they will pay whatever they need to get that container, because it's like pay an extra $100,000 for 5 containers, or pay $1 million in fees to Walmart because of the not delivering the stuff. So what are they going to do, right? They're going to pay that money. That squeezes small manufacturers, small companies, those guys that and I feel bad for any company that's got a sizable game, a game of any volume, because they take a lot of space on a ship. they've had a big Kickstarter and they're trying to deliver it now, and they're looking at a container that might have cost $6,000 before the pandemic, $10,000 during the pandemic, $25,000 now, and the numbers are just going up and up. We're not in that situation. We produce our books here in North America. We have a few bits and bobs in China, but the only things we have now are small, so the impact on us is stuff that we can deal with, provided we don't have delays that come from all of this, difficulty getting a reservation, a booking. So we're not impacted, and the timeline for Stealing Stories is not impacted currently, although I will tell you, when we built the P&L for Stealing Stories, we put in that $25,000 a container, not the $6,000 we would have put in if we built that P&L, a year ago. So we think we're sort of future-proofed against that, and all the analysis is that the hump on this is the Christmas season of this year. That freight's going to be a really problematic. Manufacturing's going to be really problematic through the fall. It's going to be it's going to be a different story in the spring. So, but we've sort of accounted for that. So that's kind of that's yeah. And in answer to your question, right? Like, it doesn't answer the general question of like what makes things hard. That's all about now, right?
I'm just fascinated from the business side of things anyway. So
yeah, that's definitely I had no idea about
my
any
language right now, Charles.
Well,
I
was just gonna say, huh?
Let me just finish what I was saying. When you mentioned Walmart, I didn't think so much of the penalty fees. I thought of losing that contract. Mid to small companies, they strive to get a buyer like Walmart, and to risk losing it over shipping has to be heartbreaking.
Yeah, but any of the big chains, right? If you're Walmart, Target, Barnes and Noble, like anything that's a national chain, if you're putting a product in there, you're under a contract to deliver that product. And to be fair, this is not them bullying you. They're making their plans. They sit down and they figure out what's going on all the store shelves in detail, months and months in advance. And then if the suppliers don't deliver, it hurts them, right? So this is not me bad-mouthing Walmart or anybody else. Like, they've got their own business situation, but they also have the power to like force the manufacturers to do whatever they can and sort of push that risk or that difficulty out to the smaller companies.
Unfortunately,
I mean, like you said, I think we're seeing it, and we just see it across the board. The company I work for, Tesla, same stuff. We get weird fluctuations in what we can do because of the shipping. And it's just as crazy. So I get it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting times for sure, right?
Especially the chlorine. I absolutely didn't know that. That's really interesting that it affects so many different companies.
Right, and I call that out just as sort of an example, right? Because there are other things out there that we don't know about, or that aren't affecting our industries or whatnot. But you never realize how interconnected things are until suddenly there's one thing that's not performing, and then it sort of everything else grinds to a halt.
Yeah.
Oof, definitely rough.
Go ahead, Al.
No, it's definitely rough. And I did not have any idea that chlorine was used in such a fashion. So I'm learning lots of new things tonight. But anyways, we already kind of asked like what comes in the box, whatnot. And you guys are hitting stretch goals like mad. Can you guys tell us anything about future planned stretch goals and what might be included extra in the box? And are you surprised at how well it's doing so far?
Definitely pleased with how well it's doing so far. Like, we are always careful about estimating what a new thing is going to do, because you don't know until people are seeing it, whether they're going to love it or be like, whatever. So we're pleased. Yeah, absolutely. So what's coming up? We usually don't say too much about our upcoming stretch goals. We like to keep our cards close to the vest, but I will tell you this, and this is a big one. Your heists have twists and they have turns. This campaign will have twists and it will have turns. This campaign, like the game, is Stealing Stories for the Devil. The campaign is The Devil Made Us Do It. There's going to be some surprises in this campaign.
Okay, that's awesome.
So you heard that, guys. You have to keep keep on, even if you invested into the Kickstarter, keep on going back to the Kickstarter. You might want to upgrade. You might want to get both the deluxe edition. You might want to get the everything at everything level. So just keep on hitting the Kickstarter because something cool is going to happen. If Charles is saying that now, there's something really wacky going to happen.
And
I'm
looking at this Kickstarter, looking at this Kickstarter, guys. If you know any retail stores, please tell them about it because that's a great deal for a retail store to put this on their shelf. You know, I'm going around. I'll actually be hitting all my game stores in the area tomorrow. You know, I'm off work tomorrow, and I'm going, and I'm like, look, did you see this?
Thanks, Dean. That's great because this will be the only way that the stores can get the deluxe version.
Right.
And that will not be in distribution. Yep. So I'll give you one more thing on the stretch goal front here. This is going a little bit further than I usually do, but I will say this. There's a twist coming soon. We're, I don't know, about $8,000 from a stretch goal right now. So usually, when that stretch goal happens, we announce the next big thing. I'll just say that there's a twist coming soon.
Oh, boy.
Nice.
Dean, before you ask your last question, everyone in chat, I know you guys have been putting awesome questions in chat, and I'm keeping a mental note of what everyone put. If Charles is okay with it, as soon as we ask this question, we're going to ask some questions from the chat. If you have anything that you want to ask Charles about this current Kickstarter or anything MCG related, please put it in chat and put question in the front so we know that it's a question you want to ask Charles.
All right. So the final question, Charles, from us, from the CU guys for the night.
Yeah, dude.
Twofold question.
All right.
What can you tell us about, how projects are progressing, in particular, like Heroes of the Cypher system? And what can we look forward to from MCG? Are we going to get another Kickstarter maybe this year? Or, I don't know, what can you tell us?
Yeah, okay. So Heroes of Cypher System stuff's coming along on track. We've got Claim the Sky and First Responders heading out for, going this fall. Those books, I was just talking about issues of, in the supply chain and whatnot. Those books are both produced in North America, so they're not affected by freight issues. They come to us by truck. So we're not, we would not expect any delays from that. Our vendor for books is a vendor in Canada that we've used for almost all of our books, a great many, 100 projects probably, since we started this company. They're very, very reliable. They did, however, slip on the tallest character portfolios. Those were supposed to have been done. They're supposed to have been done like 4 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, and they're not going to be done until mid-August. And that was a disappointment, but they are so reliable that when they say we can't get this to you on time, it's because of a real problem. They're not just screwing around. So they have a lot of cred with us. And that again it's a COVID-related thing. I don't know if it's a supply chain issue or whether it's so many companies ramping up business again at the perceived end of the COVID pandemic that caused scheduling conflicts. At this time, they are not telling us about any scheduling conflicts that would cause delays for either Claim the Skies or First Responders, which are the ones that we have queued up next with them. So as it currently stands, in answer to your question, we don't anticipate any problems with those books not coming out on schedule. And they're good books. So Dean, I know you yeah, I know that you were on the playtest materials for Claim the Sky. I know that you were very excited about it. So yeah, it's and the book's going to look great. I mean, everything about that's looking really hot. And First Responders though is such a different book, right? Because I don't know how much you remember from back in the Kickstarter.
Oh, yeah.
But it's about playing first responders in the real world, right? So you're solving problems that are not sort of violence-oriented adventures, as so much of most RPG activities are. You are instead responding to hurricanes and floods and pandemics and disasters and whatnot. But in addition, it also provides the Cypher Systems rules for dealing with sort of like mega events, right? Like having a big event be the adventure, and you could take those rules and port them into Numenera or your Cypher System Zombie Apocalypse game or whatever it is you want to play. That book, because it reflected so much real world stuff with the First Responders, was a very different book for our design team, right? And it was a disproportionately large amount of work for the size, the scale of the book. Although I think, don't hold me to this, I think it might end up being a little bigger than we promised in the Kickstarter, in part because of that.
We won't argue.
So it's turning out really, really cool too. I mean, I think it's a book it's just, I don't know, kind of revolutionary in what it's got in it. It's really exciting.
Nice.
So those are two big releases for Cypher System in the autumn, and like I said, they are all on track. Will there be another Kickstarter? There's a whole lot of the year left, isn't there?
Good answer.
And that's all I'm going to say about that.
I have to say, I mean, anybody who doesn't know it, like I said, I've got the playtest materials. Claim the Sky is great. Oh my God, such a great book. If you didn't read my spoiler-free review, check it out. It's on Facebook.
Yep, I point out that Dean asked for and received sort of a special permission. We do normally have the playtesters under NDA, but Dean was like, I'd like to write a review. He didn't tell us what he was going to write, but I was kind of confident that it was going to be a pretty good review. So I was like, yeah, go ahead.
I was good.
Yep, he totally was. So going back to Kickstarters, right? Like one of the things about, we did the Darkest House earlier this year, and it was unique among many of our Kickstarters because we often will do a Kickstarter for a game like Stealing Stories, where we're going to build this game and it's going to take us the better part of a year to do that. And I will call out, we put August as our delivery date in the Kickstarter. We gave a warning because of all the stuff that's going on in manufacturing that it could be later. Our actually plan is to beat that by a couple months, right? Our internal schedule, but we just wanted to make sure we were safe. Anyway, so that project's a year out. We do something like Heroes of the Cypher System, and it's not just that it's a year out, but then it's several books that might go for another year, right? Some of our Kickstarters take 2 years to deliver out through 5, 6, 7, 8 books. The Darkest House was here's the Kickstarter, here's the product. We got a couple other pieces coming just in a few weeks from now, and then we're done with it, right? Like it's not putting stuff on our schedule for 2022 or 2023. So yeah, we like all of our products to launch with Kickstarters. So we're going to need stuff on the schedule for 2022, 2023.
I mean,
a whole lot of the year left.
I think it goes without saying, MCG, you guys have been doing Kickstarter better than any other tabletop RPG company out there, hands down.
Thank
I
you.
don't even think there's a discussion. There has never been a Kickstarter that you haven't fulfilled every stretch goal, what was promised. Not only that, you went above and beyond a lot of your Kickstarters where you got additional, like better quality product than was initially advertised. So I don't think across the industry, no one doubts when it comes to Kickstarter what MCG does. Your guys are sort of like the gold standard.
Really, I have to agree. Great stuff.
Thanks. We're not perfect. Like we saw delays in Invisible Sun and other things. We aren't perfect, but nobody's going to bat 1,000. We do try to always over deliver or deliver as meet all of our commitments, and be very upfront if there's ever a threat to that, as we have been with this campaign.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
always
I said,
nice
I don't think we mind you guys being a little late because, like Anthony said, the quality of what we get is always primo.
Thank you.
I mean, you look behind me. I can't help it. It is what it is. So.
Al, you want to ask some questions from the chat?
Yeah, I was just about to dive into that. So let's start diving. I'm just going to scroll all the way up to the chat to go to the first question asked. And this is from our good buddy Josh at Angel Citadel.
Josh. Hey, Josh.
So he's asking, are you planning on doing any more seasons in the future, or is this just a single 12-episode season? Meaning outside of the Kickstarter, will there be some, additional stuff?
Yeah. Stay tuned.
Oh!
I love it.
Alright, next one we got is from, again, another buddy of ours, Jason. They ask, or if you wanted the whole Twitch username, Jason C. Shadowmane. Hopefully I said that right. Does it only take place in the modern era, or could Alara modify the current time period?
So as written, and as you start the game without any sort of spoilers about what might really be going on, you would be playing straight up in the modern era, and you're trying to fix reality, not break it further. Because breaking it further is dangerous, right? So does that mean that's a full restriction, like that you would never see anything actually, I don't want to spoil anything, but I also don't really know enough to be able to give you a really, really good answer if I did want to spoil it. So suffice it to say, there's more going on in the backstory of this situation.
That sounds interesting. I will. Yeah, now I sort of want to take it in that direction.
It definitely sounds fun. We do have one other side question from Josh. He says, "Are you getting hit with the pulp and paper increases on the book side with your vendor in Canada?"
So paper prices change, and they are going up. They are not yet going up to the point where it's impacting our P&L in any sort of really dangerous way. I mean, when you make a book, there's a lot that goes into it, and you might have a 15 or 20, or depending on the size of the book and the scale of the print run, $50,000 or $100,000 print bill, and that's a lot of money. But you've also spent a lot of money on art and a lot of money on editing, and months and months and months of staff time and all of these other things, so that when you get down to the paper component of the printing cost, paper can go up 10%, but your P&L your costs on your P&L have only in total gone up by, 0.25% or 0.5% or something like that. So far, nothing that's been, prohibitive or problematic for us. We keep an eye on that all the time, though.
We got 2 more questions that just came in.
Yep.
Our great friend Ken Davison, he's an awesome indie game designer. He asks, will they be, or what's the license for indie creators with this product? It seems like a fun space to develop in.
We've not established those plans as of yet. Not out of the question, though.
Awesome.
And GM, our buddy GM Sprinkle, or he's Sprink's GM now. He says in one sentence, Charles, why should he back this, or why should we back this?
That's a tough one.
No, I'm a long form composer, particularly when you get a game like this that has so many innovative elements. So I will say that if I were to say this in one sentence, by giving the players an unprecedented level of narrative control, you create a really fun, fast-paced game full of successful, exciting heists. And you get to play this dude that can change reality.
I like a little and addition to the sentence. Still one sentence. You said and. Still one sentence.
Same sentence.
And I have to say that, because Ken also made a good statement. He said his wife is a public health nurse giving vaccines right now.
Oh, good for her.
Going to be getting rep in that book. And it's kind of cool because my wife is doing traveling nursing now, too. So it's like,
Good.
Cool
God bless them. God bless them.
This is a good question that we didn't ask. What's the base price for the game if you wanted to join the Kickstarter just for the base game? What would that be?
Standard edition is $70, and the deluxe is $110, and there's a great deal on the 2 of them together, and twists and turns in the Kickstarter.
And the last, another question that we didn't directly ask, which I think is kind of important that we do, is when's the Kickstarter end?
13th of August, Friday the 13th of August. Yeah, that's not significant.
I love it.
So, well, it looks like we've come to the end of all things, Charles. We didn't just put a game together or anything because you've been here. You know our ways. We wanted to talk to you, have a good time. And you have anything else you want to say to the people out there in the interwebs hanging with us tonight? Any last thoughts for them?
No, I think we covered a lot of ground, right? Like I would just be repeating myself if I were to say things like, pay attention to the Kickstarter because there's going to be some cool stuff and, things like that. That'd be.
Anthony, you got anything to tell the world?
I talk too much. I always have something to say, but I just want to say, go visit the first and foremost before I get into my spiel. But go to the Kickstarter, visit it. You could always just sign up for the base game. And if you're intrigued about the additional, the additional stretch goals, you can always increase it later. But the important thing is that you add money to the Kickstarter to begin with. You could always raise it later. And like we always say, everything they do is quality product, so you're not going to be disappointed. I promise you that. If you purchase some, we've never been disappointed. And you look at guys that purchase every Kickstarter have yet to be disappointed. So, please, please, please go support this company, because not only are they a great gaming company, they're great individuals, great human beings, and we absolutely love them. But if you like us and you like what we do, you like Cypher Unlimited, join the Cypher Unlimited Discord. We have the largest fan-run Discord server, talking all things Monte Cooke games. We have games being run every day, discussions about every Monte Cooke game, setting, game type. And yes, we just added this Kickstarter to our channel yesterday. So if you want to talk about this, just go on over. We have over 4,000 members that love to talk about MCG. If you like our videos, please like, share, and subscribe our videos on YouTube. We're trying to bring our content up there, viewership up there. So please go there and subscribe. If you hate us, go there and tell us you hate us as well. Any content on the algorithm is approved. We love it. Or give us a little donation on Ko-fi. Every little thing. Our videos always be free, but every little thing helps with stuff like Zoom costs. Last but not least, go to the Cypher Unlimited store and pick up some of this cool Cypher Unlimited merch like Dean got on, like the hat I got on. Last but not least, on top of that, is we love you guys.
The only thing I'm going to say before I let Al take us out of here is, you know what? You just won't be disappointed. Tammy, if I'll be in trouble if my wife watches this video and I do not give you a shout out from her. She loves you. She thinks you're the best. She always says that every time I said something. When I said Charles was going to be on the show, she's like, "What about Tammy?" I'm like, "Well, she's not on the show tonight, honey." But so shouts out to Tammy, who is absolutely and utterly amazing. Charles, you are a lucky man.
Thank you.
Does a phenomenal job, and just thank you so much for being who you are, both of you. And MCG, just keep up the good work. Al, it's all on you, buddy.
Yeah, so as usual, thank you guys so much for stopping by. We'll have links down below in the YouTube description for everything we discussed, like the Kickstarter. We'll also have links to the Monte Cooke Game Store and also to Charles Ryan's Twitter if you want to see more from him directly. Also put those links in the chat just now, so if you're here and you want to check them out now, definitely click those bad boys. And yeah, just thank you everyone for stopping by watching. It was a great conversation. Thank you, Charles, for coming on again and talking with us. It's always a pleasure. And yeah, hold on before you give them that last one. Everybody, tune in next week. We will have Sean K. Reynolds here to talk more MCG. This is going to be a whirlwind because the week after that we got Monte Cooke, the man himself. Please show up, because we're going to show up.
And you guys have Latia in there somewhere too, right?
And
the week after,
the following week. So we this is going to be a month of Monte Cooke.
Or we could just be lying, but you still have to tune in.
That's right.
Might be lying about the order of these things. Who knows?
Right. This could be. Maybe we should turn July into Monte Cooke month.
But either way, yeah, definitely come check out the rest of those interviews, the discussions in the following or coming weeks. They're definitely going to be a blast. We're going to learn a lot more about stealing stories for the devil. I have a feeling it's going to be some twists and turns. But again, thank you everyone.
So I'll particularly call out. Your conversation with. Obviously Monte, like that's Monte, right? But Sean, he's run Stealing Stories. I've only ever played it. He's run it, so he's deep in that. Like if you got questions about Claim the Skies, First Responders, the tallest adventures that are currently going, he's like, up to his elbows in all of those things. Sean's gonna be a great interview. And then of course, Monte.
I personally think that Sean jumped on because Sean takes pride in he's been on the show more than anyone else. And he heard you were coming on for the third time, so he was like, no one's topping me. I'm coming back.
It's like getting the longest road in Catan, right?
Listen, you guys are all great, but Sean is a special human being. I love that guy. He's my brother from another mother. And, great mentor. He's just an awesome individual. I love Sean. So
Yeah, but with all that said, thank you again, everyone. I'm the kind of a little bit of a tangent there at the end, but love it. And he loves to hear a lot of the extra stuff, so definitely come check out, next week and following weeks for all this juicy information. And again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Charles. And yeah, from us at the CU, we will see you later.
Thanks, everybody.